let me introduce to you Melodie Erives. And Melodie comes to us from a very hot state of Texas. She told me earlier that it's already been in 3 digits there. So it's not quite that warm here, but it is interesting how warm it is there. So Melodie, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about your family and how you came to homeschool.
Okay. My name is Melodie Erives, and I'm in El Paso, Texas. I've been homeschooling we just finished our 19th year.
Wow.
I have 4 children. My third one just graduated. He just finished the 12th grade. So I have a college graduate, I have a college student, I have a high school graduate, and I have an 8th grader. I came to BJU. I was a teacher by education. I am a special ed teacher. And when I started teaching my own children, I started looking for curriculum, and I found BJU Press. And then I only had one, and so I did the teacher-led program, and he loved it, and I loved it. And then when we adopted our next 2 children, he was unhappy, and I was unhappy, and my daughter was unhappy because I couldn't do everything. And that's when we found then the HomeSat, which is the old downloading and putting it on VHS tapes. And my children loved the teachers. They loved the interaction, the puppets, the field trips, everything about it they loved. And I've not looked back. We've loved it, and they've done well. They've excelled. I've been a consultant for 10 years, and I've loved that as well, just dealing and helping other homeschool moms and parents and sharing what I've done and what has helped me. And so
it's wonderful to see how there are different products for different people, and even for the same people, when at different times come, something else will work better, even though it's the same material. Generally, the format's different. To have another teacher do the teaching for you, or to have those extras that, as a mom, you can't be the puppeteer, you can't be the cartoonist.
Right.
Having the PowerPoints, those are just so powerful for kids to be able to have that. And having that option is great. I hope that if you haven't tried a video course, that you'll try one this year. Even just try one. What is your recommendation, Melodie? If they were to try one, what would you recommend?
Well, there were 2 that just really stick out in the elementary with me. That was the most impactful was the Science 2. There was one lesson. Then it was Mrs. Vick who taught the Science 2. She went on a field trip, and of course it's in South Carolina, and we live in Texas. She went on a field trip out into the woods. My children have no concept. She was turning over logs and showing all the bugs and the creatures, and they must have watched that one lesson 10 times in one day, because they just don't have that concept. And so it exposes your children to things that you just don't actually think about that might be normal somewhere else, that is just so impactful for them. And then another thing that my children even talk about to this day was with Mrs. Walker's 1st grade reading class. And she made them she did a cowboy segment, and she made them do a menu. My children still talk about the menus that they came up with. And, so those are memories that they wouldn't have had if I hadn't done the video lessons.
That's amazing that far back, 1st grade and 2nd grade. That is so neat too, because you're still overseeing the learning, you're still facilitating things, but to have that input from a teacher, you have that personality, you have the extras there. It's just so worth trying a class. So if you're on the fence on it, try one or try 2, and see what your kids think. But for people who have multiple children, when you're homeschooling, it really helps mom to be able to have her hands free to do something else, maybe help another child specifically in a certain subject. but it is a wonderful thing, and hopefully people will try those. I hadn't thought about that, but regionally in our country, places are different. We don't see all those things, so that is a really
Right.
good point.
Yeah, and you just don't really realize even the academics. We talk about the critical thinking that the press puts into their books, and you don't really think about it. But I remember, like with Nathaniel, the first class we tried was the math. We tried the kinder math, and then it was just the teacher led. And so by I don't know, I think it was the second grade, we started doing the home stat, and the teacher asked him a question and he put it on pause and he put his head back, and I asked him, I said, Nathaniel, what are you doing? He goes, mental math. And I said, well, did you come up with an answer? And he goes, yes, it's da da da. And it was correct. He turned it on. See, mental math works, Mom.
Wow.
And I would have never taught him mental math. I would have taught him pencil and paper. And here he's learning things that I wouldn't even consider teaching, because that I wasn't familiar with that kind of thought process. And those are just critical thinking little steps that you don't think about even in the lower elementary that they're getting. So
well, that's true. And I think, as teachers, as moms, we know what we know. And so we teach what we're familiar with. And
correct.
which is good, by the way. It's not a bad thing. It's concepts are still concepts, but sometimes kids catch on differently than the way we teach or the way that we have learned. So even having that variety, where they may not pick it up here, they'll pick it up there, or maybe one child will get it the way that you teach it, but another child will pick it up another way. But with math, especially, there's more than one way to attack a problem. So it's always a good thing for them to try different ways to do that. So I know that you wanted to talk about critical thinking, and actually, Melody does a workshop on critical thinking, which is very well attended. And so I thought maybe she could just give us some input on the things that she has learned as a consultant, as a homeschooling mom, someone who's taught now 3 graduates using BJU press materials and critical thinking. So I'm going to let her chat a bit about that.
Well, a lot of mine comes from even my degree in special education I have with the hearing impaired. And so, even in college, you learn about, the forming of letters when they're learning to speak, and you learn about how the brain works. And so when I started doing BJU Press, I didn't realize at that time, I didn't collate all of that information, that this was critical thinking. And until I started really studying when I was doing the teacher led, in the lower elementary, yeah, you might get the teacher's edition, but you don't really look at the teacher's edition. Oh, I know how to do this. I don't need the teacher's edition. But when I started, English was my difficult subject. And it talks in there, they'll have literal questions, they have appreciative questions, and then they'll have critical thinking questions. And I thought, what is all of this about? And so you don't really realize until you actually pursue the teacher's edition, actually what it is teaching with the critical thinking. And so when you think about, most curriculums teach rote memorization. Let's memorize our math facts. Let's memorize different aspects, and let's just spit out the verbiage that we've learned and not really take in that critical thinking concept, so that most curriculums are teaching the what is blah blah blah, where BJU Press is why do we do it this way. And so, like when they're teaching long division, they teach the long division as the why. It's not 4 into, your number is 4 into 5,640. It's not 4 into 5, it's 4 into 5,000. Well, why? Because we're talking about place value, we're talking the steps. And then it goes back, okay, so how do we make the steps simpler? Why are we teaching phonics? And why do we teach phonics the way that we do? Well, the vowel O has 8 different sounds. Children get tired of trying after a couple of times. Fact from testing. And so they give up. But those are critical thinking steps as a mom you don't really think about. It's just, okay, this is how I know how to do it. And I'm looking for something simple and something easy. And so children's brain waves don't actually completely connect. Those synaptic relays don't actually connect until around the age of 10. And that's why a lot of children do well with rote memorization when they're little, because that's how the brain is geared. So your child asked that why question, you answered 1,000 times. They keep asking it because they don't have the synaptic connections to understand that why. But the press continues to teach that why simplistically in that, the 5 to 10 range. But what most curriculums stop doing is when you get to 10, they continue to teach the rote, where the press starts diving deeper into critical thinking, the why. And you notice it more in your histories and your science. They do teach it in all the others, but that's where I have noticed it the most, and even in the literature. And we have some in-depth conversations my children and I do with that why, because they'll ask all those opinion questions. Those are those little starred questions in their readers. Those are the critical thinking questions that go digging deeper beyond the information in the book. And that's why it's so great, because we are building thinkers that just don't just have rote memorization, have no idea why something is the way it is. I just know that this is how it's supposed to be. And so we are allowing our children to be dumbed down because of the curriculums that we use or we don't use, because it's just rote. And most curriculums are rote memorization, because that's, if you look at test scores, up through the 4th grade, test scores are high. And I'm talking internationally, not just, with your child. But then above the 4th grade, test scores in the United States drop drastically. We spend, out of all the nations in the world, we spend the most money on education, and we are way down in below the middle of the pack because of our test scores. Well, why is that? Because we're teaching rote memorization. And after the 4th grade, rote memorization doesn't work, because even in testing, they have questions specifically built in for critical thinking. And so that's why it's just so important as a mom to be looking for curriculum that actually has embedded in it those critical thinking concepts, because we don't want just rote memorization.
I think for moms too, you want all those things for your kids, but you're thinking, how do I provide that? And so God gives you some wisdom, and he helps you to ask good questions and to have those conversations that you were talking about. But we're having these conversations every day around math and around spelling and around literature. And these become, and this is what I love so much about homeschooling. These are everyday conversations all day long, whether you're doing something academic or not. You're building up your child. You're building a foundation and prayerfully asking God to grow your child spiritually and emotionally and academically and all those things. But you're pouring all those opportunities into your child all day, every day, whether it's during classes or not. And to have materials with that already written out for you as a mother, and not just here, ask a couple of questions, pick a who, what, when, or why, but these are very specific questions designed to have an outcome.
Right.
There are objectives written in that lesson so that at the end of the lesson, your child should be able to accomplish certain things within that lesson. And so we're constantly shaping and designing those lessons to get an outcome, which is hopefully that your child understands something in a new way and then can apply it. And I think that's really what you were aiming for here, is not just that they, they have some rote memory, they get it, they can think critically, but in the history and the science and the English, your kids have been able to take that information and use it immediately in their own lives.
Correct. And, and most children don't think about that that's what they're learning. They're just taking it all in, and they store it away in their microcomputer in their brain. But I think we as moms, we buy that thinking that the world says, oh, my child is reading by the time they're 4. But your children might be reading the words, but do they understand and comprehend in depthly what those words are? And I think as moms, we've gone to the superficial surface of our education, and we haven't really dived deep into what is that education meant to do for them. And, when I had a teaching degree, I could have, gone and, been a teacher in a school and just sent them to class, just like a lot of moms do. But I felt like I saw where public school was failing. My son would have been in the principal's office every day. He was a wiggle worm. He was a chatterbox. And I couldn't do that to him. So that was why we decided to homeschool for that first year. But I saw the benefit of knowing not just his academics, but knowing his personality and knowing where God was leading them. There's more than you build their character, and that home and that critical thinking is doing that. It builds their character. It builds who they are in the future. And that was what I came to appreciate most about the Press's curriculum, is that we're building the mind so that when they move out, they have a worldview of their own that stands firm no matter what is thrown at them. And that is what we want as parents, to have children who can go out in the world and be successful and prosperous in whatever God leads them to do. And that is the ultimate goal.
Well, and to do that the way your child learns.
Right.
It's spectacular because, maybe your child would have gone to a Christian school and maybe even used the same material.
Correct.
But it wouldn't have been individualized toward his learning, and those conversations may not have happened between you and him and between your husband and him, which is amazing and a wonderful thing. And as your kids get older, and of course your kids are a little bit, they've graduated, 3 of them. In a couple of years from now, Lord willing, they're going to see the value of what that education is that you gave them. And I wouldn't be surprised if you tell us a story down the road about them coming back to you and thanking you.
Well, Sasha, my daughter already has. She's the one who's in college right now. And she, she would tell me stories of, I remember her literature class. She had the professor, she had to buy a grammar book. It was like a 280-page grammar book. And he assigned it halfway through the semester, and he gave them 3 weeks. And she did it in 3 days. And she told me, she goes, all of my, my grammar teachers, Mommy, this made it so easy. And she said everybody else was complaining how difficult it was. But she said, I just went flying through the book. And she would tell me specific teachers that, well, this teacher made me do this. And that's just one of many stories that she's told me and thanked me for.
Wow. That's incredible. And it's another testimonial to the video teachers as well.
Yes.
These are teachers who are actual teachers. These are teachers who take the BJU Press lessons from the Teacher's Edition, and then they rewrite them and recreate them for the homeschool child in mind. And then they add the field trips and the PowerPoints and the songs and the animation, all that, to be appealing and interesting and try to reach the different modalities of learning. But those teachers are highly interested in your children and want to teach them so that they're successful. They are partnering with parents. And so that's what's so beautiful about when you go to a convention, or if you can come to South Carolina and take a tour, these teachers are very, very interested in hearing how your kids are doing. They're pouring their hearts out in these lessons with the expectation that there's children on the other end that are learning and growing, and it is mutually very satisfying for parents as well as it is for the teachers to hear these stories. So I'm so glad that you took the time to tell that.
Well, and also you talk about the teachers and their concern for your children. You know, one of Danny's favorite teachers was Mr. Kopp, and I've told you this story before. And Danny actually met Mr. Kopp at a convention, and they still write to each other today. They text, I mean, they email each other, and this has been like for 5 years. And so here's a teacher who has taken an interest in my child and his welfare. And so it's not just a teacher on a screen, it's a person who has meaning in their lives.
That's
And
fantastic.
that is more than I can ever think as a mom. That someone really, and you can send letters to them and those teachers answer them and have compassion on them and excited with them. You can't get that anywhere else.
No,
That love that they have.
that's right, and they're unified in that in the same as we are as consultants and as homeworks in getting those critical thinking skills, that biblical worldview shaping, teaching to their needs, um, supporting homeschooling, all of that. They're in agreement with that, and we all are as consultants and as the homeworks team. We're all on the same page, even though we're in different parts of the country doing different things. Our end goal is to glorify God and to teach our children who He is with excellence, and that is a unified goal, and it shows. It shows in the way our kids learn.
Well, and being a consultant doesn't happen first. Being the homeschool mom or the homeschool parent is what happens first. And you love the curriculum so much that I wanted to share that with others. That appreciation that I have and what I've learned and how I've seen it mold and make my children better than what I could have done as their teacher. And
Absolutely. That's the
and
beauty too of talking to a consultant at a convention or online. When you have questions, this is somebody who uses the materials every day. They know the ins and the outs. They know what worked with their child, what doesn't. But they've also talked to hundreds of other families in their area, and they know the hiccups of what's available in your state, or what other groups or families are sort of tending toward, and what's working and what's not. And so that's the beauty of having a local consultant. So Melodie lives in El Paso area.
mm-hmm.
And so homeschooling might be different in El Paso than it is in Houston or in Austin or in Dallas, even though they have the same state regulations. There's different types of groups and different types of things going on there. So having that consultant that can give you a wide variety of answers to questions about homeschooling, but then also how that material works for your child is really, really important. And I just love how energetically excited you are about the material and about being a consultant. And congratulate your son for us.
I will.
Looking forward to seeing some pictures of him as well. And by the way, Melodie has done multiple videos for us on our Homeworks YouTube channel where she goes through and explains organizing. I think there's 4 videos on
Mm-hmm.
video courses that you can watch. And she's also written some blogs too, so you might want to check there to get some information from her. Anything else before we go?
No, I just really appreciated, the being a consultant for homeworks. to share that passion. But it has, beyond that, it has grown me as a mom to teach my children more diligently, but to share with other moms more diligently what the BJU Press offers and how it can mold your children to be what you really do want them to be, successful, mature adults. And I have seen that, and I know that there are other consultants out there that don't just have little ones, but you can really homeschool all the way through the 12th grade. You don't have to stop at the 6th grade. You don't have to stop at the 8th grade. BJU Press gives you the tools to be able to teach all the way to the 12th grade and do it well. And that's what I've really been excited when I found the videos. That was the most exciting thing. I could homeschool all the way to the 12th grade. And they
That
do it
is
well.
amazing. It's amazing that you get to do that and with confidence and to get the result that you were hoping for. And it's amazing that you get to share that with people. And hopefully people will pick up on that. If you're in Melodie's area, please contact her if you have questions about homeschooling. I know she's available to talk to you. She wants to share the wealth of knowledge that she has, the things that God has taught her, her experiences, and she wants to interact with you and to be part of
Yes.
your homeschooling as well.
Yes.
So, well, Melodie,
Yes.
thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we'll put your website up so people can find you and then find the
Okay.
events that you have as well.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Absolutely. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank
Bye.
you.